You know that feeling, right? That mental fog after you've been scrolling for way too long? It's kind of like a digital hangover. Well, today we're going to dive into what's really going on inside our brains when that happens, and more importantly, what we can actually do about it.
Okay, let me just ask you something. Have you ever felt that buzz in your pocket? You know the one. And you reach for your phone, but there's nothing there. Your phone didn't even vibrate.
If you're nodding your head right now, you are definitely not alone. It's a real thing. It's actually called phantom pocket vibration syndrome. What's happening is our brains get so trained to expect a notification, so anxious for that next little hit, that they start misinterpreting things. Like the fabric of your pants rubbing against your leg, and your brain just goes, oh, notification, when there was nothing there at all.
So, just how common is this? Get ready for this number. A whopping 89% of us have felt these phantom vibrations. 89%. That's pretty much everybody. It's a huge sign of just how deeply these little devices have burrowed their way into our nervous systems.
And it's not just about these phantom buzzes, right? It goes deeper. On average, we physically pick up and check our phones 175 times a day. Just think about that for a second. Every single one of those little checks is a tiny habit, a micro decision, and all of them are adding up to have this massive impact on our brain chemistry.
So, why? Why do we do this? What is this magnetic pull our screens have on us? Well, to figure that out, we've got to talk about a really important chemical in our brain. So let's get into what's called the dopamine dilemma. All right, let's talk about dopamine. Now, you've probably heard it called the pleasure chemical, but that's not quite right. It's really the motivation chemical. It's that little voice in your head that says, hey, go do that thing, it'll feel good. It's what drove our ancestors to find food, and it's what drives us to check that next notification.
But here's the thing, and this is super important. Not all dopamine hits are the same. There's what you could call effortful dopamine. That's the good stuff you get from, say, finishing a tough project or finally cleaning a messy room. It feels earned, and that kind of dopamine actually replenishes your brain's supply. But then, there's the effortless dopamine from our phones. It's instant, it's easy, you just scroll and get it. But that kind, it doesn't fill you up. It actually drains your tank.
I love this analogy from neuroscientist TJ Power. He says to think of a part of your brain as your own personal dopamine factory. Now, what happens when you're constantly demanding cheap, easy products from a factory 24/7? It gets overworked, right? It breaks down. That's what's happening. We're exhausting our dopamine factory with all these cheap hits, and it just can't keep up. So our motivation, our attention spans, they're just left running on empty. And this is where we see the hidden cost, the trade-off we don't even realize we're making. You know, every time you come home, sit on the couch, and start scrolling, instead of really talking with your partner or your family, you're making a choice. You're choosing that quick, easy hit of dopamine over something way more profound, oxytocin. That's the chemical of real human connection. And that one choice creates this whole ripple effect. Chasing that easy dopamine means we're also sacrificing other crucial brain chemicals. We get less serotonin, which is huge for our mood and for sleep. We get less oxytocin, that bonding chemical. So what's the end result? It's this weird modern paradox, isn't it? We've never been more connected, but a lot of us feel more lonely and isolated than ever before. Okay, so we're messing with our brain chemistry, that's clear. But what's the long-term damage? What is this doing to our ability to actually think? Well, this next part is where things get a little alarming. Let's talk about the cognitive cost. First up, there's this term floating around called brain rot. And look, I know it sounds like some dramatic internet slang, but it's not. Researchers are observing actual physical shrinking of gray matter in key parts of the brain. We're talking about the areas responsible for memory, for regulating your emotions, for making good decisions. This is real.
And then there's something called digital amnesia. Think about it. When's the last time you actually had to remember a phone number or directions to a new place? We don't have to anymore. We've outsourced our memory to our phones. We just trust that they'll remember everything for us, so our own memory skills, well, they've kind of gone on a permanent vacation.
And this is not just a feeling. There's data to back it up. Check out this crazy study. It found that more than half of us today cannot recall our best friend's phone numbers from memory. But a huge number of those same people can still remember the landline number of the house they grew up in. Why? What's the difference? Simple. Back then, we had no choice. We had to use our brains to remember. Our connection to these devices goes way beyond just memory. It's deeply emotional. There was this study where they took students' phones away from them for just 1 hour. 1 hour! And for the heavy phone users, their anxiety levels just shot through the roof, way, way more than the light users. It's proof right there that we're not just using our phones, we are psychologically tethered to them. Okay, I know, that all sounds pretty bleak, doesn't it? But hang on, because here comes the good news. The best news, actually. Our brains aren't set in stone. They're incredibly plastic, which means they can be rewired. So for this last part, we're going to focus on exactly that, how to fight back and start building up our most important mental muscle.
So let me introduce you to the hero of our story. It's a part of your brain called the anterior mid-cingulate cortex. Okay, that's a mouthful, so let's just call it the AMCC. This little region is basically your brain's willpower headquarters. It's the part that lights up every time you resist an easy temptation and choose to do the hard thing instead. And here is the most empowering thing you'll hear today. The AMC acts just like a muscle. And I mean that literally. Every single time you feel that urge to check your phone and you don't, you've just done a rep. Every time you choose to focus instead of getting distracted, that's another rep. You are giving your willpower muscle a workout. And just like any other muscle, the more you work it, the stronger and even bigger it gets.
So, how do we start training this muscle? There's a brilliant, simple rule you can start with today. Just 3 words to remember: meals, bedroom, bathroom. The idea is to make these 3 places in your life totally screen-free zones. No phones at the dinner table, no phone in the bedroom, and yes, no phone in the bathroom. By just creating these boundaries, you force yourself to take a break, to just exist, and you end up giving that willpower muscle dozens of little micro workouts all day long.
And you know what happens when you actually do this? You're going to come face to face with an old enemy: boredom. We've been trained by our phones to think that boredom is this terrible thing that we have to escape from immediately. But what if we've got it all wrong? Let's try to reframe it. What if boredom isn't the enemy? What if it's actually just your brain's chance to daydream? It's a way for our over-caffeinated brains to finally rest. And you know what else happens when we daydream? It's where our most creative ideas come from. So I want to leave you with this question. We spend all this time and energy scrolling, looking for the next interesting thing, the next idea, the next piece of content. But what if the next big breakthrough, your next big idea, isn't out there on a screen? What if it's already inside you, just waiting for you to get bored enough for it to finally come out?